marschieren in Reih und Glied.
Hello there. Today we'll be discussing German colonial radio stations. It's an interesting topic and a big rabbit hole, so I hope you enjoy. The German Empire was delighted to have wireless telegraphy as a means of communication that could complement or even replace submarine cables. Wireless telegraphy offered the opportunity to overcome the German Empire's existing dependence on international communication to gain a lead over their other major powers. They had the advantage over submarine connections as they could not be destroyed by enemies in a case of war. This has been repeatedly stated by military and naval experts. From 1911, the Imperial government and the Navy concentrated on using the overseas position to build a new communications network that could implement the German submarine cables. The location of the colony subsequently determined not only the structure of the network and the expansion stages, but also defined the central requirement for the wide area radio technology that was still to be developed. The expansion of the German network was to be carried out in four phases. Initially, a number of coastal stations were to be established in the German colonies, which were important for communication with their own ships, especially those of the Kriegsmarine, and for monitoring foreign ships on the important sea routes to India and East Africa. In the second step, the colonies in Africa and Asia Pacific regions were to be connected to each other by large stations with a range of at least 4,000 kilometers. With the help of transcontinental radio stations of range 6,000 kilometers, connection between African colonies and German Reich was to be established. Finally, the oceanic colonies should be connected to the rest of the colonial network. Now, this took a lot of years and a lot of development, but within a few years, until the beginning of the First World War, the first three of the phases were completed. The task essentially solved. In 1914, there were only two coastal radio stations, one in Tsingtao, the capital of Kiasacho, and the second in Sinope, New Guinea. A separate company, the German South Seas Company for Wireless Telegraphy, had been found to set up large-scale radio systems. It built four large stations on the islands forming the corners of horizontal diamond. The Apia station on Samoa in the east, the Nauru in Marshall Islands, the north central region, and the station Rabaul in south central region on the Bismarck archipelago, and the station Yap on the Mariana Islands in the west. From Yap, the Sintown Naval Station, located only 3,650 kilometers away, could be reached. Later, the connection to East Africa was also planned via Yap, but the direct distance far exceeded what was technically feasible at the time. So the Reich's government planned to build a relay station to Sumatra, 8,000 kilometers from East Africa, if the Dutch colonial government approved the construction of such a station. At the outbreak of the war, radio messages could thus at least be received everywhere. Radio telegraphic replies from ships over great distance were rare for technical reasons. The radio network was just being built in German colonies, passed its test in the early days of the First World War. The squadron in the Pacific under Count Maximilian von Spee was able to receive early information about the threat of war via the radio station in Samoa. During the July crisis of 1914, the value of Transcontinental's radio station Kamina in also became apparent in the first months of the war. Kamina played an important role in transmission of orders, military reports, and the news from Berlin to all colonies and to the warships in the waters there. It was responsible for relaying all messages from African colonies to Berlin. The station's most important task was to urge all German merchant ships in South Atlantic and the Caribbean to seek neutral ports. In August 1914, the German overseas cable from Monrovia to Tenerife were cut, thus interrupting the German connection to South America and the branch to West Africa. But they hadn't considered that this left the cable to South America to the German colonies in West Africa still intact. Thus, messages from South America were routed to Douala, then Cameroon, and then relayed by radio to Kamina. Even after the Germans abandoned Lomme on August 8, 1914, the station's mission was to listen and jam enemy radio traffic continued. The only major battle that took place to defend German Togoland was on August 14, 1914, on the Shara River. 60 Germans and 400 African mercenaries were held their positions by making defensive structures around them. British troops attacked the position for several hours but were unable to capture it and lost 17% of their men. Under enemy pressure, Kamina's towers were brought down by its own demolition charges, and machines and equipments were destroyed. A significant achievement of wireless telegraphy was lost. At the radio station of the other German African colonies and German islands in the Southeast Seas, German radio operators performed their duties until the enemy forces neutralized the stations. With the dissolution of the German colonial empire in the wake of the First World War, the German Reich lost the basis of its planned German global system. However, Great Britain, France, and USA still continued the construction of their own global radio communications, which they had begun before 1941. Even today, almost 90 years later, international telecommunications connections in Africa are mostly dominated from companies from these countries. I hope this was an interesting topic, and I'll see you next time. Countvondabar, signing off.
In den Städten wohnt ein Mädchen und das lieben wir so sehr, denn es hat zwei blaue Augen, blonde Haare, 17 Jahre.